This is Beyond a Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Gary Smith.
GPS, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Sunday?
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't look too excited this morning. What's the matter, Gary?
Oh no, I'm good. There's a lot to talk about. We had a comment that you sent last week. I'm not sure that it's swag worthy, but you asked me to ask you about it.
Which one was it?
Well, it was someone who thought that the third topic we talked about last week was distasteful, and they were not very pleased with it.
Oh, Hak Tui.
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, did you notice? I'm going to ask you something, and people comment on your eyes because you're going to look for it right now. So, a Hak Tui girl, woman, became a internet sensation. We played something or ended with it last week. She made her debut, her country music debut last night, I saw.
Yeah.
Maybe you got that, Gary. I had not sent it to you, but now that you mention it, I think that person ought to get some merch because they thought it was I think something do you have it that you can put it up so I don't misquote them? I want to accurately capture the gist of it.
Yeah, if you just give me half a second here, I can find the comment. It's right here. So let me just get it up on Zoom.
And she certainly has become a internet sensation for better or for worse. And here was the person. What does it say? The third topic that you covered is an embarrassment to this perfect podcast. By the way, that alone gets you merch. Perfect podcast. Why discuss internet means completely unrelated to anything anyone really cares about? Seems like a Gary decision. I'm coming to Gary's defense. It was not his decision. By the way, I had suspected, and Gary might find something, that there were reports that afterwards she was terminated because from her job as a teacher. I don't know if they're true, but I suspected there would be some legal consequences. But as a matter of fact, Gary, did you find a little video of her on stage last night in Tennessee?
Yes, I did. Give me just a second here to figure out where exactly. Oh, I got to stop sharing this. That's why.
So there were legal consequences to that, besides being I thought it was a rather interesting interview. And here you go. That is...
So that's her singing on stage the song Revival with Zach Bryan.
Yep. That's, she might have lost her job as a teacher, but maybe she's a fledgling singer, country music musician or vocalist.
I will say that I can think of 4 people that I reached out to between Mark sending me that clip and our recording to react to the horror that I felt that Mark thought that was a reasonable doubt topic. So definitely not my decision.
Yeah, wasn't your decision, but I did prognosticate that I thought there would be potential legal consequences, and
you were right.
The termination, whether it's wrongful or not, is yet to be decided. Well,
you asked, before we move on from this topic, you had asked who Pooky was. And I will say several people reached out and pointed out there's a TikTok star who goes by the name of Pooky, and her husband Jet, and they're famous for making videos where her husband is talking about how fire she looks. She recently announced she was pregnant, but I don't think that's the person that she was referring to, because Pooky has become a term that is not dissimilar to bae. It's just a general term for like the person who you love. So I think when she said, shout out to Pooky, he's the only one I love, she was just talking about whoever her current love interest is. So,
well, I'm going to give you another factoid. For those who are of my vintage, I used to be, during law school, I was a rock and roll music promoter. I mean, that's kind of the world, or my K-rock world. So we used to do that at Perkins Palace, which was the old Raymond Theater in Pasadena. And it was on Raymond, and I believe that's Union right there on the corner. back when we were doing the concerts in conjunction with K-Rock, we would do like the Dead Kennedys, Oingo Boingo, Go-Go's, Gang of Four, 999, the Tubes, Adam and the Ant, Air Supply, which kind of didn't fit with any of that, Smokey Robinson, Tina Turner, but there was directly across the street from the Palace a place that for a 2-year run while we were doing the concert, all of the people would spill out of the Palace and they would go across the street to this large kind of cavernous area. And this guy was coining money. And the name of that place was Pooky's. And so it resonated from 40 years ago. So when she says, "I love you, Pookies," it kind of reminded me of that as well.
Yeah.
Gary's like, "Okay, Mark, enough with the stories." The next one I thought was kind of interesting, and we'll move on to Karen Reed, and then we'll end with Adam, I think, was, a lot of people will talk about some of these Supreme Court decisions, and the last 2 weeks has been monumental. There are decision after decision after decision. There's the Securities and Exchange Commission decision, which basically they no longer can do in-house courts. They've reaffirmed the Seventh Amendment right to a jury trial. You can't have these kinds of kangaroo courts, so to speak. But one of the decisions that a lot of people, at least in the legal community, are talking about that isn't getting a whole lot of press because I don't know that people understand the ramifications of it, is this overruling of 40 years of precedent of what's called the Chevron deference. And Chevron was in 1984. The EPA was interpreting rules and regulations based on statutes that were enacted, and they wanted deference to the EPA for their interpretation of the statutory rules that they were promulgating. And that was a Reagan era enactment in the sense that the decision came down and was supported by the administration at that point. That was overruled in a 6-3 decision. Part of the six-member majority that overruled that decision was none other than Neil Gorsuch. Fun fact that I said to you, Gary, was it had occurred to me that I have in the back of my mind that Neil Gorsuch's mom was Ann Gorsuch, and she was head of the EPA. And so I Googled today, and sure enough, Ann Gorsuch was head of the EPA at the time, who was kind of forcefully promulgating, or if you were asking for the Chevron doctrine to begin with. And her son is the one who is in the majority opinion undercutting the Chevron, basically overruling that precedent. And so you're going to find rules of this will have shock waves for the stability of a lot of areas of law, whether it's the EPA, whether it's health and safety, whether healthcare, whether it's all kinds of other agency interpretations, DOJ, all kinds of interpretations that the courts have basically always deferred to the federal agency involved does not look like will any longer be the case. That's going to be the province of the judges themselves. This is a sea change, and only 40 years of precedence. Dobbs was more than that, but in many ways, this has ripple effects that even exceed the Dobbs decision in terms of overruling precedent.
Yeah, and Gorsuch didn't just overrule it. He, in his opinion, he sort of danced on the grave. I mean, he was gleeful in the fact that he was able to strike it down.
Yeah, having dealt with the EPA rules in the context of some of these, the California, mini EPA, which they call CARB, and some of these other agencies, we've dealt with agencies. There is a compelling argument that we had moved way too far in deferring to the agencies. The argument is that because the agencies are headed by political appointees and because you have basically Republican and Democratic administrations who appoint their head of the agency. You can take the EPA, for instance. And the head of the EPA will change from one administration to the next. And the argument is that you've got an instability because the change of the interpretation of the rules will change from one administration to the other. And the argument is that that causes instability. The counterweight to that is, well, the instability of relying on 40 years of rules and kinds of being able to calculate that in the business community is going to cause nothing but engender more litigation, which clearly it will. And so it's just a fascinating way to take a look at. To my mind, that was one of the decisions that probably doesn't get a whole lot of mainstream or in the heartland coverage, but that is going to be something that we'll be talking about, especially in the short term in the legal communities and business communities for the next couple of years. That's going to have you'll be seeing all kinds of decisions all over the place challenging that. Also, the majority decision talked about how this shouldn't be looked at retrospectively, meaning are people who were operating under the yoke of prior decisions that were based on Chevron deference going to be able to challenge it? I just think that's almost a little Pollyannish, because I think clearly somebody who is operating under whether it's an automaker or manufacturer or somebody like that who's operating under the old rules that were based on Chevron deference is now going to say, wait a second here, there is no deference. I want to revisit this because I think that their interpretation is just dead wrong.
Yeah. And I agree with you. Given the number of things that the court came out with this week, that's not one that's going to be just discussed at many dinner tables across the heartland.
That's exactly right. Now, one that will be discussed, at least in the Northeast and I think nationally, is the Karen Reed case. We talked about it last week. The jury came out. I think I had predicted that we would hear Friday by 3 p.m. Instead, it was 3 p.m. Eastern. They came out and said that they were deadlocked. The judge in the case sent them back out to deliberate more. And they did, and they restart their deliberations as we record this on Sunday, tomorrow, Monday, and don't restart, but they resume their deliberations. And there was a couple of interesting things. One of the things that caught my attention was Alan Jackson brought to the judge's attention the fact that the verdict form did not have a spot for not guilty of the lesser included offense. When you're charged with murder, there are lesser included offenses. Alan pointed that out, and here I think we've got a piece of the tape.
Back to session, you may be seated.
22-117.
All right, so why are we out here?
Your Honor, I just saw the verdict forms, and as we discussed yesterday, the amendments that the court indicated it would make them.
Oh, no.
Not been made.
Okay, I did not say I'd make it. I said I'd think about it. I said I was tired and I needed to think about it.
What you said before you were tired and you needed to think about it was you agreed that there needs to be not guilty options for the subordinate charges under count 2.
I said that it made sense to me, but no, I did not change it upon looking at it because this verdict slip as submitted to the jury is exactly how it always is in Massachusetts.
I ask you a question then. I don't really care how it always is in Massachusetts. I care about whether or not it's appropriate.
It's appropriate.
Different things.
It's appropriate.
Let me make my argument, if you wouldn't mind, Judge, why it's not appropriate. For a superior charge, they have to decide that she is not guilty of the superior charge. And that is the starting point of whether or not she is guilty or not guilty of any subordinate charge, often called a lesser included. Once they decide that she's not guilty of the superior charge, now there's two additional charges that they've been instructed they must decide whether she's guilty or not guilty of. How do they decide that she's not guilty of the first subordinate charge, involuntary manslaughter?
Okay. Anything else you want to say, Mr. Jackson?
I'd like an answer from the court. How do they decide that she's not guilty of involuntary manslaughter on that verdict?
That's their decision to make.
And how do they make it if they don't have an option to check a box that says not guilty?
They don't check the box that says guilty, do they? And then when they go to the next block, they don't check the block that says guilty. And on the top, you're left with not guilty. Okay?
So it's the absence of the check mark that the court determines is the not guilty finding by the jury.
Yes, that's what the verdict slip reads. It reads not guilty. If they don't check block 2, 3, or 4, the verdict slip reads not guilty. Okay? That's how it is, Mr. Jackson.
Well, and apparently that's how it's going to be because of the court's order. That is not how it should be, and it's over our strong objection. They need to see that there is a not guilty option for the subordinate charges. If they come back guilty on, for instance, involuntary manslaughter, that's immediately appealable. They didn't have an option on the verdict form to find her not guilty. It's almost like the court is directing a verdict of the subordinate charges.
Okay. I disagree with you. Ms. Giannetti, you've seen verdict slips exactly like this. Okay?
I actually haven't.
Have you had no lesser includeds?
No, we've always had lesser includeds, but I have not seen a verdict slip there where not guilty is not an option for the rest.
Okay. I disagree with you. All right. Excuse me. This is funny, Ms. Reed. All right. We're done.
All rise for the court, please.
Judge, you get a little testy there.
She's not only a little testy, the answer, this is how we always do it, which is one of the kind of my, once again, I'll invoke my father. He used to that used to crack him up. Where do you cite? I haven't ever seen that in either a case or a code section that says this is the way we always do it. Alan is spot on. That is essentially a directed verdict. The judge is, that's inappropriate. That is an inappropriate demeanor by her. And by the way, little added bonus, she changed her mind. She came to her senses after she left the bench and she scolded the defendant. Do you think it's funny? Yeah, it is kind of funny just how dismissive she is of a verdict sheet that is nonsense. I mean, how do you have a series of lesser included offenses and you don't have a box for not guilty? How are you supposed? I mean, if you had 2, you could at least make an argument. But when you've got 3 counts, 2 of which are lesser included, you have to have a box that says not guilty. It's just nonsense.
Yep. It's good that she came to her senses, though. But yeah, the fact that she's being openly hostile with the defendant is seems inappropriate.
Well, I believe that they moved to recuse her at one point because of her a perceived conflict of interest. And boy, it's on display here. I mean, Alan is making a righteous objection. He's trying to argue it. She's given him short shrift. She had second thoughts because obviously she was wrong, and she's got no basis to, after a month-long trial, to basically direct a verdict and not fix whatever she thinks is the usual kind of violation of due process. So absolute nonsense.
So the other thing that we had was the jury being sent back after coming to them after 3 or 4 days. I believe it was 4 days, but the judge points out that they're abbreviated and they had said that they were exhausted and that they were pretty much asking for the jury to be hung. And the judge sent them back to continue deliberating. We do have a clip of that if you're so
sure,
inclined.
Let's see it.
Let's go to some breaking news now in the Karen Reed case.
Earlier this week, they've had slightly shortened days, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form suggesting that they haven't conducted their due diligence in regard to their deliberative process, but I would submit that it is far, far, far too early in their deliberative process to even consider giving them any kind of Tui Rodriguez instruction or anything close to that. Furthermore, what the note doesn't really indicate affirmatively that they can't come to a conclusion. It just says that they haven't come to a conclusion through their deliberative process at this time. So they're not even asking for one, is what I would say.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Giannetti, I'll hear you.
Your Honor, I would disagree with Mr. Lowry's characterization of the note. The word exhaustive is the word I think that's operative here. They're communicating to the court that they've exhausted all manner of compromise, all manner of persuasion, and they're at an impasse. This is a case where the jury has the legal instructions. They've only really asked one question, which was to try to get a report that they were not allowed to get. And I think the message has been received that the evidence is closed. They won't get anything more. They've been working essentially nonstop over the last 3-4 days. We're approaching a weekend. They didn't come back with this at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock. They're at 12 o'clock and they have nowhere to turn. So our position is the jury should be read the Tui Rodriguez model instruction and go from there.
Okay. All right. So you all know that it is within my discretion, I decide. So a case that has been, it's a long case. This is our 4th day of deliberations, but Tuesday was a short afternoon, maybe 2.5 hours. Wednesday, they left early because of an appointment. Yesterday was also shortened a little bit. And this note arrived with less than 3 hours of deliberations today. So the length of the trial, the length of the deliberations, I know the case we heard from 74 witnesses. There are 657 exhibits. Very complex issues in this case. I'm not prepared to find that there have been due and thorough deliberations at this point. So I am going to send them back out. We'll bring them in and we'll do that now.
So we were going a little faster than normal there at the beginning for anyone who noticed that. Sorry about that. I had it on a different playback speed for my review before we started, but nonetheless, you get the idea. Judge is not ready to let them call this a hung jury, and she's sending him back in deliberations, which will start tomorrow as you listen.
A little inside baseball, the prosecutor was arguing for not to give what he calls the model instruction, as I heard that. And the model instruction, there are in various jurisdictions, federally as opposed to the state, there is an old instruction called the Allen instruction, also called the dynamite charge. And when you have a hung jury, you sometimes can blast that deadlock by reading them the Allen charge. California has disapproved reading of that in the state court. It's still okay in the federal court. In fact, I've had trials in federal court in California where the Allen charge was read and trials where it was not read. And also federally, I can remember one case where the judge in a federal jurisdiction would not read it outside of California. They're not asking for that. It looked like the defense was asking for that, which is interesting because the calculation, when you read the tea leaves, the defense, I believe, thinks that the jury is tilting their way and that it's tilting their way, meaning more not guilty voters than guilty voters, and they're wanting the instruction. A lot of times the defense does not want it because the defense assumed that it's guilty or is the predominant view. So the prosecution here, there's kind of a change from the usual. The prosecution's not asking for it. The court did not, it doesn't appear, give it, and the defense had asked for it. That ought to tell you something as to what the respective parties think is going on with the jury at this point.
If you had to guess, how long do you think that they go at this charade before they come back and say, we told you already, this is exhaustive and we're done and, we're not getting anywhere?
It's interesting. If I had to prognosticate, when you go past Friday afternoon in a lengthy trial, and that's generally, as you've heard me a million times, you go past 3 o'clock, that's the bewitching hours.
We're also heading into a shortened week with the holiday.
Correct. I can't imagine that they're not going to either break the deadlock Monday, Tuesday, or come back and say, once again, we've exhausted all remedies. There are oft times you will find that a juror, after sleeping on it for 3 days, 2 days, basically, will change their mind when they come in on Monday morning, and you'll get a quick verdict in the morning on Monday. If it goes past noon on Monday, then that would seem to indicate that they are not able to move whoever is in the minority, or it could still be 6-6 for all we know.
But by the time we start seeing fireworks, we'll probably have an answer one way or another.
That's exactly right. Now, the last thing we want to end with, we're going to come full circle, is for those of you. Did you say something, Gary?
I said "we" is an interesting characterization.
Last thing I want to end with. You know what it is. Here you go.
Adam Carolla here. Governor, why did you shut the beaches in California during COVID?
Yeah, I think we all were working on information at the time. We had no basis of deeply understanding the virus. I think they did the same thing.
So you didn't know anything, so why'd you shut the beaches?
States like Florida.
If you didn't know anything, why'd you shut the beaches?
Well, we didn't know. Yeah, because people were concerned early in the pandemic. Information was coming out as it relates to how it was transferred, the disease, and people were cautious, trying to keep people alive. And I should say this,
so
Adam,
you didn't let them go in the sunshine and get vitamin
California
D
outperformed.
and exercise, so you shut the beaches. Okay. And you arrested a guy who was paddleboarding in the bay.
Health, wealth, and...
Yeah, any science behind that? Any science at all behind shutting outdoor dining? Why'd you shut down outdoor dining? Go ahead, go.
Science. It's good to see Adam.
Based on science,
look,
you didn't
have. At the end of the day, the debate tonight.
It's not a debate. You shut down outdoor dining. You canceled businesses. Had nothing to do with science.
All right, let him finish.
All right, go ahead.
All this happened in the.
See, that was Thursday night. Chris Cuomo had Adam on set along with Stephen Smith, correct?
Correct. Stephen A. was there.
Stephen A. was there. And I don't know if Adam knew, or if I haven't asked him, or if Gavin knew, but I'm going to guess that Gavin did not know when he made that appearance that he was going to get questioned by Adam. But shout out to Adam about asking about outdoor dining and the science. I love it because the answers. Adam asked 3 questions. One was, well, if you didn't have the science, why'd you do it? And then, so you did it without the science, and there were no good answers to that other than what you saw, that stumble and fumble.
Yep.
Gary bopping his head. He's not going anywhere else near that. Okay. Gary, as always, I love seeing you on Sunday morning. Have a great rest of the day, and hopefully I'll see you on Monday or Tuesday.
All right. Looking forward to it. Good luck in your trial, and hope to see you in the office soon. Thank you for your time on Sunday as always. And we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/Reasonable Doubt Podcast.